The biblical basis for caring for the creation. The aim of this Oxford Round Table presentation is to show that human population needs to be addressed to solve ecological problems. Churches can help by making known the biblical basis for creation care. The presentation is in 3 parts. First, an outline of the biblical basis for creation care. Second, human population linked to environmental degradation. And third, comparing population with per capita consumption. Contents of the talk are as shown. Part A, the biblical basis for creation care. Whether Christians see a Bible passage as historical or figurative, poetic or literal, their aim is to understand its spiritual meaning. The opening words of the Bible are, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." An order for creation of life on earth is set out. Plants first, next animals, then humans. What did God say about all of his creation? And God saw everything that he had made, and it was very good. The role of humans follows. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, and let them rule over the fish, the birds, etc." So God created man in his own image, male and female he created them. Humans are to be in God's image, that is, they are to have his holy, righteous character. Whether they be male or female, it makes no difference. These words do not give humans a basis for pride. Jesus was God's perfect revelation of himself, and he was a servant Lord. To rule or have dominion comes from the Hebrew rada, R-A-D-A, meaning a point higher up on the root of a plant. Where is rada on this plant? It's at the top of the root, the place from which shoots radiate above ground and roots radiate below the soil. Rada is also the center of strength for a plant. So the human species is meant to be the center of strength for all other living things on earth. Genesis 1 also sets out the role of reproduction in the continuation of a species. First, plants. Let the land produce vegetation, plants that bear fruit with seed in it. Next, animals. Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply." Last, humans. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." Were humans the only ones to which "go forth and multiply" was addressed? No, it applies to plants, animals and humans. There is meant to be balance in nature. Is "go forth and multiply" a command or a blessing? The text says it is a blessing, that is, a good wish for personal well-being. Commands are different, and in contrast, they can be very difficult to obey. Also, as a blessing, these words are meant for particular circumstances. What was the context of these words? A rule for interpreting the Bible is that a passage must be taken in context. Here, as each new species appeared, its context was one of near zero populations, so "go forth and multiply" was appropriate. This graph shows human population over the last few thousand years. In biblical times it was very much smaller than it is today. Now we need to turn round our human population graph and let species that are disappearing go forth and multiply. Genesis chapters 2 and 3 contain the story of Adam and Eve. They are the theological description of the fall, showing that human disobedience to God leads to broken relationships with God, our fellow man, and nature. The Old Testament has many passages showing God's care for nature. In Proverbs it says, "A righteous man cares for the needs of his animal," Proverbs 12:10. The commandment to rest covers farm animals. On it, the Sabbath, you shall do no work, nor your animals. Exodus 20 verse 10. There are warnings about what happens when humans take all the land for themselves. Woe to you who add house to house and join field to field till no space is left. Isaiah 5 verse 8. That is why your land is not producing, and all living things grow sick and die, and even the fish begin to disappear. Hosea 4 verse 3. However, God's plan of hope to bring about a change in the hearts of people is also revealed. Through the prophet Jeremiah, the Lord says, I will put my law in their hearts. That change of heart has been achieved through Jesus, who said he would draw people to himself through the cross. John 3:16 says, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. The word for world in Greek, cosmos, can refer to the universe as a whole, and so include plants and animals. Relationships can now be restored between us and God, ourselves and one another, and with nature, because a person united to Christ is given a changed heart. Therefore, nature is included in God's plan of salvation. Part B. Human numbers linked to environmental degradation via the economy. The booklet Conservation Through Having Smaller Families, written for high school students in comic book style, can be used to illustrate how human numbers are linked to environmental impact. We will look briefly at the first section, which is on money. Are there more people on Earth than is helpful for the planet? Most probably, yes. World population is increasing. Better medical care means that people now live longer. Babies which once might have died as infants now live to produce families of their own. Each living person has needs which the earth must supply. Food, clothing, shelter, and energy supplies are the basic needs. Money is usually the key to these things. But where does the money come from? Trade existed before there was money. Money was developed as a convenient way of selling and buying things. But money by itself is useless without things to spend it on. And money cannot be circulated unless it is backed by production from the ground, for example mining, or from the soil, or from the sea, or from the bush, for example forestry. So money has to be backed by production. Think about where your money comes from. Some people have jobs in primary industry which are directly related to the earth's provision, for example farmer. The jobs of others in secondary industry depend on the raw materials which the earth supplies, for example factory worker. All the other jobs are in the tertiary sector. For example, some people have work in service industries related to goods produced from the earth. And some people's salaries come from the taxes paid by others, for example, teacher. While some people depend on the work of others for their financial support, for example, children. When we trace our money back to where it came from originally, we will find it is from the productivity of the earth. And what will we exchange it for? We will spend it on goods and services, all of which flow from the productivity of the earth. So we see that all jobs originally depend on the productivity of the earth in mining, forestry, agriculture or fisheries, and come at a cost to the earth's ecosystems, which must be removed or modified for these activities to take place. Also, money raised via jobs is exchanged ultimately for basic needs, food, clothing, shelter and energy supplies, which are again supplied at a cost to the Earth's ecosystems. Each person therefore has an ecological footprint due to resources taken and wastes produced. Australians, for example, use nearly 7 global hectares per capita. On average, the Earth's population uses 2.7 global hectares, but there is only enough for 1.7 global hectares each. In 1986, when population was approximately 4.7 billion, we began to overshoot Earth's biological capacity to provide for us. Since then, we have been using up biologically renewable resources like forests, fish, food crops, etc., faster than their natural replacement rate, and producing CO2 much faster than nature can absorb it. This table shows that the date on which overshoot occurs is getting earlier each year on average. In 2013, it was August the 20th. It took less than 8 months for the human population to use up a whole year's biocapacity. Global warming. Global warming is now a major threat to biodiversity. There are 3 levels of biodiversity. First, diversity of ecosystems. Second, diversity of species. And thirdly, diversity within species. This picture shows a thin layer of remnant vegetation beside a still water body. Through the trees we can see the land has been cleared, which is for agriculture. Fertilizers containing nitrogen and phosphorus have, through runoff, entered the still water body and caused a degree of eutrophication shown by the algal bloom within the water. Overall, any clear dichotomy between pristine ecosystems and altered areas that may have existed in the past has vanished, the main causes being an increase in atmospheric CO2, an increase in the fixation of nitrogen for fertilizers, and the fact that human land use has transformed a third to a half of Earth's ice-free surface. These 3 and other equally certain components of global environmental change are the primary causes of loss of biological diversity, and they in turn are caused by the extraordinary growth in size and resource use of the human population. Secondly, diversity of species. The Centre for Health and Global Environment at Harvard Medical School says the following on its website. Climate change alone is expected to threaten with extinction approximately 1/4 or more of all species on land by the year 2050. Species in the oceans and fresh water are also at great risk, especially those that live in ecosystems like coral reefs that are highly sensitive to warming temperatures. Thirdly, genetic diversity within species. This diagram shows the evolutionary pathways for 9 species of European aquatic insects and how they have diversified over time. Each insect species is shown by a different colour sector on the circle. The diversification is shown by lines from the centre to the outside of the circle over time, branching in different directions. Black lines show those species which are expected to survive beyond 2080, and white lines show those lineages expected to be lost by 2080 if global warming continues to increase and goes up by 4 degrees. A total of about 80% of genetic diversity is expected to be lost. Part C. Is it more effective to reduce population or per capita consumption? The IPCC's most recent report from Working Group 3 identifies population as the main factor in emissions growth for the 40 years from 1970 to 2010. As well, population is the bigger of the two multipliers because it is a multiplier in billions. In the 20th century, population increased by a factor of 5 and consumption by a factor of 10. Which was more important? Well, which is bigger, 5 times A or 10 times B? It all depends on the values of A and B. If A and B are the same, for example, if they're both 2, then 10 times B is bigger. But if A is 2 billion and B is 2, then 5 times A is a lot bigger. The answer is population, which started out at around 1.2 billion in 1900 and went to 6 billion by the end of the century. Consumption per capita was modest initially. What about recycling? Population outstrips waste reduction through recycling. A study in the UK showed that up to 80 lifetimes of responsible recycling is completely cancelled out by the arrival of one more person in the UK via the airport or the maternity ward. Population has an upward momentum, as shown on this graph here, due to descendants left behind after a person passes away. The saying, "you can't take it with you," applies to our possessions, but any descendants left behind continue the upward trajectory of the graph and do so as consumers. Some other points to consider. A theoretical person has zero consumption when compared to any actual person. If we're considering bringing another person into a family, then we need to consider this, that a person who remains theoretical has less consumption than any actual living person because their consumption is zero. Next, if we cut consumption in any area, we may feel good about that, but we may make savings, and they're often spent on other things, for example travel, so no net gain may be made. Also, if we share our income with other people, family members or worthy causes, again we may feel good about that because our consumption has been reduced, but the total environmental impact remains unchanged because it doesn't matter whether we or someone else spends our money. The fact that it is spent changes the environment. Next, while using renewables may reduce per capita consumption of fossil fuels, we need to check out the energy return on energy invested of renewables. That is, we need to check the maths. In some cases, it is negative. This is shown on this graph here of US energy sources, where the renewables found down in the left-hand corner of the graph here are low in energy return on energy invested and low in actual total energy, apart from hydro, but the sources of hydro are virtually used already and cannot be increased. It should be noted, of course, that some fossil fuels are also down here. For example, tar sands has an exceedingly low energy return on energy invested. While important, renewables take money to make, and that money has to be raised at a cost to the Earth's ecosystems somewhere else. It has been said that only a small percentage of GDP would be enough to switch to renewables. But GDP takes energy to raise. For example, in every dollar of Australian GDP, there is the energy equivalent of a quarter litre of petrol. Renewables such as solar, wind, etc. are comparatively low energy sources. What can be done? Human nature may be helped through the Bible. Jesus chose 12 disciples from the existing population, representing the 12 tribes of Israel for whom procreation had until then been appropriate in context. To these apostles, Jesus did not say, "Go forth and multiply," but "Go and make disciples of all nations." New creation now supersedes procreation. Tackling either population or per capita consumption may go against human nature. Here the Bible teachings can come in, enabling Christians to be amongst those who can act effectively. Jesus taught his followers not to store up treasures on earth but in heaven. He taught that this life is to be lived with the next in mind. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? There is a saying, we cannot have our cake and eat it too. Earth's beauty and natural diversity will continue to decline while population increases. The human population already has a cumulative, voracious appetite. We are on a collision course with nature. There is an urgent need to curb our numbers so we can maintain habitats for all other species, so they could recover and thrive. In this slide you see a koala standing in the midst of, or sitting in the midst of, a clearfield area which has been cut clear to, nearly to the horizon. He's lost his tree to live in, his eucalypt species that he depended on for food, all his family members, and all the familiar sights of the forest. This particular koala may have been rescued by the photographer because the photograph was taken by a WIRES volunteer. In summary, blessings come with responsibilities. The Earth's ecological predicament is due not so much to bad things as to two great blessings: increased survival rate and improved living standards. Both have come through the hard work of good people like doctors, our survival rate, and engineers, our living standards. So we have a corresponding responsibility to counterbalance this through reduced family size. We accept the blessings, we should accept also the responsibilities without complaint. And the Bible has the last words. These laws are not mere words, they are your life. Thank you.